Everybody, welcome to the On Sun podcast. Today I'm here with Terry Bursey from my home province of Newfoundland, who we met on a little group called Podcasters on Facebook, which has almost 44,000 members. He has his own projects we'll get into after, but said he was from Newfoundland and we started chatting and then we found out that we are distantly related.
Yep.
So
It's
welcome to my
wild.
show, cuz. Well,
We're related through the Bursey side, your mom's side, I guess, and my dad's side.
yeah, I'm from originally, well, Bishop's Falls and Gambo and all that area. And as you know, 15, 16 kids. I got pe people in my family I've never met before. So it's pretty
Same.
wild. So, yeah, tell a little about yourself here.
All right. Hi guys. My name's Terry Bursey. Creatively, I go by TC as a kind of pen name for writing and other projects. It's short for Terry Carson. Um, I'm from Newfoundland and Labrador, as you know, my home province. I love this place with a passion. I am a writer. I'm also an autism advocate, autism self advocate, as I myself, while I might not present obviously as autistic, I am diagnosed as an autistic man myself, specifically what used to be called Asperger's syndrome, but Asperger's syndrome is no longer a thing. It's all based on, it's all under autism now. I'm a board member for Autism Newfoundland and Labrador, which is otherwise known as ASNL, as part of my volunteer work. Really involved in the autism community in Newfoundland and Labrador, especially when it comes to social justice for autistic individuals, as well as pretty much anything to do with writing. It is my biggest special interest is literature, writing, being creative, and science fiction, especially as well on top of that. But I tend to branch out into other things. Just an all around nerd from the rock. Also a podcaster. I have my own podcast called Stories from the Rock, which is just short stories with a Newfoundland undertone, Newfoundland theme. Um, and I'm also a single father to a neurodivergent little boy. He's autistic like me. His name's Max. He's here somewhere. He's 5 years old. And yeah, we're a family of two, and I couldn't ask for a better life.
That's after I did my first episode. Someone said to me, "Man, it's pretty good, but you got to work on that Newfie accent a little bit. It's coming through too strong." I'm like, "Well, now for this one, you got two of us here, so mine comes and goes." Um,
Yeah,
I stopped in Toronto for 10 years on the way to Alberta, so I don't drink anymore. But when I used to get drunk, you couldn't understand a word I said. It came right back like that. But
right. It comes back with me too. Like I spent a lot of time in the mainland too, and I grew up in Alberta, and I guess we'll get at that at some point too. I didn't necessarily grow up in Alberta, but I spent like two very strong developmental years in Alberta, and it fundamentally affected my accent. As well as other things. It's an autism trait too, and that a lot of autistic people tend to adopt accents from outside of their area. We're still unsure as to why. It just sort of happens. Um, but yeah, I can talk like this and talk of a storm in a Newfoundland accent, or I can talk like this and be like super professional and enunciate. So switches back and forth for me too, buddy.
what do you think the biggest misconception is about autism?
Oh, the biggest misconception about autism? Uh, that would be, I guess, that we're all damaged goods. A lot of people look at autism as we are we were meant to be born a different way, but something went wrong and we ended up being autistic. But it's not necessarily the case. He says as he's juggling a Nesquik bottle that my son handed to me just now. Um, we are, autism, how we look at things now, there are two models. There's a social model of autism, and then there's the medical model of autism. Um, I like to try to get them to meet somewhere in the middle because there's truth, I think, for both ways and both perspectives of looking at it. But altogether, from what we can tell, humanity has benefited tremendously from autism, and different neurotypes in general. What we call a neurotype is someone who's allistic, which is non-autistic, is a neurotype. Autistic is a neurotype. ADHDers is another neurotype, and so on. We're actually meant to be neurodiverse. We're meant to all have. Hi, my son's here. Different kinds of brains. We're supposed to have different kinds of brains as a natural part of the diversity of the human mind, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for autism. And autism isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a difference. And autistic people are meant to be autistic. I'm meant to be autistic. My son is, and if we weren't, we'd be completely different people. So everyone has their own unique perspective on it, especially autistic people. Ourselves, we have our own autistic experiences, and we have the right to think about what we prefer our own autistic experiences to be seen as. But myself, and for most autistic people in our community, we see ourselves as just different and not as damaged. And so I think, and more people are starting to one second, more and more people are starting to come along with that as well. And so, yeah, that's the biggest misconception, I think, is that a lot of people see autism as this tragedy, when really, if it wasn't for autism, we'd probably just be making it out of the Bronze Age. That's how important it is. It's not so much a blemish on humanity's tapestry as it is a vital thread in humanity's tapestry. So, yeah, that's the biggest one.
Okay, so we're back here. We don't care about little cameos and just
That'd be
keeps it
corral the
real, right? It's
youngster.
part of life. I have a 10-year-old daughter myself, and she likes to watch. She's afraid of the camera sometimes, but
It's how it is, man.
so
Uh,
how do you de-stress? I mean, you got this blog, you got this book, you got these short stories, you got a 5-year-old boy. Do you just like to keep busy? Is that
um, I do like to keep busy. I have to be at something, or else I will instinctively find something to be at. But that said, I do get burnout a lot. And oftentimes I don't know that this autistic burnout is happening until it just slams me. It's part of traits that culminate in such a way. Autistic burnout, in and of itself, I should say, is a little bit deeper than what a neurotypical person or an holistic person might call burnout, and that is that they're like just tired. For us, it affects our whole nervous system, and it can sneak up on us, especially if we. A lot of us have traits where we sometimes can't recognize emotions until they overwhelm us, and so it may seem like we snap out like out of nowhere, or that we suddenly go from like 0 to 60, but it's more that we have this kind of almost disconnect between what we feel. Like a neurotypical person can know that they're feeling stressed or anxious or mad or this and that, but for a lot of us it just kind of exists as this neutral energy, and then out of nowhere that energy can just snap out, and then we are very much aware that we are tired, or stressed, or that we are angry, or that we are this and that, because we it just bubbles forth. And so usually stimming, what we call stimming, is self-stimulation. It's a way for us to ground and a way for us to release this excess energy. For me, it's a lot of this. And you will see a lot of autistic individuals, whether that's level 1, level 2, level 3. If you're a fan of the levels, they'll do that. They'll just shake, or we'll find other ways of stimming. Sometimes it's being near water, and this is all very important for us to self-regulate, so that we can sort of ease off the tension like a pressure valve, and that'll free up energy so that we could do more tasks. And so one of the things I talk about in advocacy is when it comes to meeting the everyday 9 to 5 demands of neurotypical life, or what would be expected for a neurotypical person. A non-autistic person doesn't really work with us. We need time to decompress. We need time to step away. We need to be able to leave a meeting at a moment's notice. We need to be able to um, self-regulate in our own way in order to keep us efficient, and to keep us ready to more or less make that output that's necessary for, be that the workplace, relationships, whatever. And so since discovering all this, I do not push myself too hard. I allow myself to stim when I need to stim. I allow myself to unwind when I need to unwind. And when burnout hits, I take my 4 or 5 days and I'm gone. And most people, especially neuroaffirming people or people who are in the know, especially like large corporations and whatnot, they allow autistic people to do this because they know they'll get better output from us if they do. Um, but otherwise, we typically face a lot of barriers and discrimination when we just try to regulate our own energy levels and regulate our own stresses and be able to have this output. And so for a lot of people who encounter those kind of barriers, we tend to be very self-employed, which is why a lot of autistic people like say Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, these autistic individuals tend to branch out on their own and be self-employed because it's the only way that they can more or less regulate and contribute without having to meet unrealistic demands that are kind of blanket standards imposed by others.
Hmm.
And that's what I do. And it helps tremendously. It's how I stay on top of things.
So let's talk about this book project you're working on.
Yeah.
You called it Newfie science fiction. That's
So Newfie science fiction, true, and that it's culturally a Newfoundland book. It's actually this map behind me. I don't know if you can see. It's probably a little glare there. It's the map from my story. My sister actually drew it. She's neurodivergent like me as well, and it's my story is a science fiction tale, of course, but it's I call it Canadian science fiction during certain times, Newfoundland science fiction during other times, because I do try to represent a broad, something broader than Newfoundland. But most importantly, I try to represent neurodivergent people in this works. The main character's name is Daxton Blackwood, and he finds himself stranded on another planet after crash landing. Him and a bunch of other survivors, but at the beginning, it's just him, and he happens upon the main antagonist almost right away. Her name is Chelsea Lynn Reed, General Chelsea Lynn Reed. She's the head of Bear Bunker Security. And she is by far a very ableist person. She has no time for autistic traits, no time for autistic people whatsoever. And so her and the main protagonist clash right away. There's tension built right away. And from there, it's a story about survival on another world, Newfoundland cultural values being preserved and echoing on into a distant future. And it tells a very human story, one about overcoming adversity, overcoming discrimination, and overcoming the novel challenges of an alien world that could pretty well end humanity's last hope for survival. So that's my story in a nutshell. I'm hoping to get it published one day. I've run into some barriers with it. I went to Pitch Wars with Writers NL and tried to get that published through there, pitched it to a panel of publishers. I presented very autistically at that Pitch Wars event too, and Writers NL. They're a great service for a lot of people, but not so much for when it comes to being very forgiving about autistic traits. And it's sometimes a very socially wired industry. If you're the type of person like myself who presents in a way that is socially awkward and does have social challenges, sometimes those opportunities will present barriers for us more so than actual opportunities to move ahead. So I'm hoping that I can pursue it with other publishers and look at other kinds of organizations that might be able to help in getting that published, that are especially a little bit more understanding and sympathetic towards neurodivergent people rather than having neurotypical blanket social standards. So yeah, hoping that's the case.
well, I know I've got a few publisher friends and they all watch these episodes, so who knows what can happen.
I hope that's the case. You can hook me up if that happens.
Well, we'll see. You were 10 years old, you're in Alberta, and let's talk about your good Samaritan that saved your life.
Yeah. That was, I think, a turning point for a lot of this. I grew up not only with autistic traits, what's called PDA traits, which a lot of autistics have, stands for pathological demand avoidance. And basically what that means is that growing up, especially as a kid, If someone told me to do something, I didn't want to do it. If I had homework to do, absolutely not. If I had anything like that, I just wanted to do the opposite or not do what anyone wanted me to do. And it didn't matter if someone was a parent, a teacher. To me, everyone was equal. There was no such thing as social hierarchy. And so I didn't see a reason to listen to anybody. I was at Red Deer River. And my dad told me, don't go in the river, Terry. There's a strong undercurrent and you'll get swept away. And so I was like, you, Dad, I'm going anyway. Authority is meaningless. Social hierarchy is a construct. And I just like ran down to the water. And sure enough, hi, Max. Sure enough, I jumped in. And yeah, I almost drowned. It was, I was 10 years old, just this little chubby kid. And yeah, the water swept me away right away. Luckily, there was a man there. His name was Glenn Osmond. I'm not sure if he was a friend of my dad's or not, and I only just found out his identity a few days ago and asking him. And sure enough, when he saw the Red Deer River carrying me off, he stripped down, ran out, braved the river, swam the undercurrent, grabbed me, and like got me back on shore. And it was a real life-changing moment for me. It really was. It was, I mean, I almost died. And I mean, there have been countless times where I've almost died after that, and that someone hung me over the edge of a fishing vessel once when I was there as a cook because they didn't like my cooking and they tried to kill me there. Like, it was a lot of stuff happened, but that was a turning point in my life because it was the first time I noticed really how precious life was and how there's a kind of agency that we all have and that we can do something with the time that we have. I was legit terrified. I coughed up water. I thought I was going to die. My vision was fading in and out, and I had this ringing in my ears. Like, it was a terrible experience. I can remember it very vividly. And it was from that moment that first and foremost, decided I was going to listen to my dad. From now on, when he said, didn't PDA traits or no, if my dad tells me I'm going to drown, I'm probably going to drown. Right. And so, it was that, but it was also, I felt this sense of responsibility, this sense of a second chance, this sense of something, and that I wanted to do good in the world. I wanted to be a positive agency, like an agent of change, an agent of positive change. And in little ways, I tried to do that from that point on, even from 10 years old. But I mean, what can a 10-year-old kid do? Or at least that's how I thought. And I still had PDA traits. And so every time I thought about something like that, I'd be like, you're not the boss of me, my own brain. I'm going to just sit down and watch Beyblades for an hour. But, it's wild, it stayed with me. It stuck with me. And I can never thank Glenn Osmond enough for what he did. He risked his own life to drag me out of a raging river when I was 10. And yeah, I mean, it's part of my volunteer work now. I mean, that's what fuels it. It's like, I could have died so many times, and that was the first time that I really got that scare. I need to do something positive. I want to have a positive impact on my community, my fellow autistic people like me and my son. I want to educate people on the reality of autism, as opposed to to battle a lot of the discrimination, and to raise awareness about ableism, and to encourage inclusion and acceptance of all autistic traits regardless of your placement on the spectrum. That these are the values that I felt lucky that someone found that value in me despite my very present autistic and PDA traits as a kid, and wanted to save my life. And I feel that value now. And I want others who are like me to feel that their lives are valued. Autistic individuals like myself, especially when they get to my age, we have an incredibly high suicide rate because the world tells us a myth, tells us a story, tells us something that's untrue, that we are somehow this damaged version of something that should have been, when that's not the case. I wanted to make others feel like they are valued and that they're worth saving, and that who they are is absolutely who they are meant to be, and to in some ways even save lives with that if I can. And that's something that stuck with me, and it's all part of the same web of what motivates me every day to go out and do what I'm doing, even in my writing. So I'm hoping that I can keep doing it for as long as I can do it, because it makes me feel not just in a selfish way fulfilled, but it also brings a smile to my face knowing that people won't have to have that same self-esteem issue and that same sort of feeling of worthlessness that I grew up with as well, that I can probably change other people's perspective about their own autistic experience.
Right.
And of course, their loved ones too, and their communities.
So if you're out there listening and you know a Glenn Osmond in Alberta that saved a 10-year-old lad in a river just south of, get in touch with us and we'll have
Yeah.
one heck of a
It would have been
reunion
around
there.
Acme, Alberta, where I went to school. And
Acme,
shout out to
Alberta.
Acme, Alberta, because you guys are awesome.
You know what, man? It took me 29 years to find the paramedic that saved my life in 94. I almost gave up. And then I went online on Twitter and I'm like, this is my last try. And it went viral, was on all these media outlets. 6 days later, I found her. And then I got the interview for episode 2 on here as well. And it was so much closure and just her words were just so, it's just an amazing woman. But I'm glad you shared all this with me. I do have one last question for you
By the way,
that I do ask all my guests. It's kind of my weird little way to end the show. But 100 meters, pigeon carrying contest. How many pigeons do you think you could carry and have at the finish line at the end of a 100-meter dash?
I would get as many of them as I can, tie them all with a piece of string, and get them to carry me to the finish line. That's my answer. I'd
Nice.
be going well past that finish line, man. My eyes. I'm going where the pigeons are going, man. That's as we're starting a new civilization wherever they're taking me. That's my answer.
There you go. Maybe that's a sequel for your book. Pigeons take over this planet and
A good short story of anything else. Pigeon Land and how I ended up there. They made me their king.
okay, well, I'll fire all the links to your podcast and your page in this description when this goes up. But if someone wants to reach out to you or talk to you about autism, I'm sure you may be open to that. And
Absolutely, buddy.
it's crazy that you meet someone related to you in a group of 42,000 people, but it's great having you on. And hopefully we'll be talking again once we track down this Glenn Osmond and go from there.
Right on. It's great talking to you, cousin.
Yeah. You take care.
You too, brother.